I'll continue. Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. Chaldeans was pretty much a synonym for wise men, but were the people that lived in that place, called also Babylon. So then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. 4 types of people, as in the 4 corners of the earth, representing that since he was the king of the world, because that was the world empire of the moment, he was able to bring the wisest men from the whole world. Also of the 4 levels of interpretation, the 4 levels of creation, and also of impurity, as in these people, magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, just like the ones in Egypt, who were unable to interpret anything for the Pharaoh. The same thing is about to happen right here. So it says, then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams.